it's really a very heavy product-centric session today, right? But we have got the perfect presenter, unfortunately remotely, but this is Subbiah, is the main brains behind the HYCU product development up to this point, and of course also the future strategy. So I would argue that you will have a great person to discuss today details about the HYCU multi-cloud data protection session. So with that, Subbiah.
Thank you, Bogdan. Can you guys hear me well?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. For the team, the German team there, first off, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk with you guys. I'm really sorry I'm not able to do it in person. Looking forward to do it next time in person. And Goran Garevsky wants to share his thanks with you. And Goran is our CTO and VP of Engineering. And this is Subbiah Sundaram. I run products for HYCU. As Bogdan said, we've had the opportunity and the privilege of actually seeing the company grow from its nascent state to where we are right now. I tend to talk fast since I'm not a native. If you're not clear, please do always tell me to stop, and happy to interrupt me anytime, not a problem. So the quick thing is, just start with us as a company. We are a little over 300 people, and headquarters in Boston. We are actually, even though we are headquartered in Boston, we are a global company. Bogdan, we have a lot of people in Europe. In our industry, as you guys know, to have a significant part of our company is in Europe. That's one of the things. We have a lot of European connection there as a company. Our focus is entirely on multi-cloud data protection. We are very focused as a company. We want to make sure to keep the customer's data safe, and that's what we work on. Even though we are a younger company compared to a lot of the big names you guys are very familiar with, we have over 3,600 customers and in over 75 countries. That's the spread of our company. One of the things which people, since we are younger compared to many other people always ask us, so do you have partners? Who are you backed by? So on. The good thing is that we are backed by some of the big names you guys know, Bain Capital Ventures and ACRU, and a lot of the other strategics. I'll talk a lot more about it in a follow-on slide too. But from a partnership perspective, we have some of the best partnerships with folks in the public cloud, be it AWS, Azure, Google, and Nutanix, and so on. So across the board, and VMware. So we have a spread of customers across, spread of partners across all the major hyperscalers as well as the classic server vendors. I'm not going to spend too much time. If you look at us as a company, this is something you are very familiar with. But I just want to talk about if you think about from a data protection perspective, we see two important things which are actually happening. One is the complexity, the customers, the number of data sources customers actually have to protect is constantly growing. This is not new to you guys, but that's something we see, and we see this as a challenge for customers. And the second one is around the challenges with protecting the threats which they are running into from a data perspective. So what does it really mean with the classic challenge which we hear from customers? With the number of data sources they have, because as you all know, most customers started with having a clean data center. And they had data centers, and they had multiple data centers, and then they started having public cloud adoption. With the public cloud adoption, it's constantly growing, right? And most people started with one public cloud, and then they started having multiple public clouds. Now, the challenge is that most of the traditional tools are not able to keep up with this thing because they were all built for either Windows or Unix, or they were actually built for VMware and so on. The question is, how do you make sure you have a solution which actually supports all these different data sources and the SaaS software? That's a classic challenge because traditional architectures don't lend themselves very well for that. That's one challenge for people. The second part of the problem which people actually have is around the threat landscape. As this is, I'm sure every company talking to you is talking about the ransomware challenge, which is absolutely there. The people when think of ransomware, they typically think in terms of one data source. As you well know, that because of, again, the spread of the data sources, the challenge actually gets even more complicated. That's one part. The second one for people is that they think in terms of not just the data sources. If you think in terms of people say, oh, I'm using a different vendor to backup and they do it on the cloud. What happens for many people is that they keep the vendor keeps the data. What's the disadvantage for the customer? When the vendor keeps the backup data, the customer is inheriting not just their own risk, they are inheriting the vendor's risk too. So now it just increases the challenge for customers. Those are some of the things which we see as the challenge. It's not that I want to spend all the time here, but I just wanted to share some of the things which we see in our customers. So that led us to saying, how could we change the way people think of data protection? So I'm sure you hear from a lot of data protection vendors, and one of the things running in your mind is that, why are we different? What's our solution? Just to start with, our solution is called HYCU Protégé. That's our whole encryption platform, which allows the customers to get a full view of the data, their entire data estate. That's the C part of it. Allows them to manage across all of these data estates and make sure all of their data is protected. That is something we do. So we as a company, the way I tell people is main things which we do. We do backup and recovery, help customers migrate the data between on-prem and the public cloud, and public cloud back to on-prem, as well as we provide disaster recovery for customers. That's the macro level we do for the customers. And to talk about why are we different and how are we built, right? The thing is that the way it starts off is that for one of the big differentiators for HYCU compared to many other vendors is that for every one of the cloud, be it AWS, Azure, Google, VMware, Nutanix, every one of them, we have built the purpose-built solution for each one of them. From an engineering perspective, it's extremely heavy, right? Because it's a lot of work to build individual purpose-built solutions, which are tightly integrated into the thing. When we talk about purpose-built here, for example, in the AWS, it is a native service of AWS. Same thing in Google, it's a native service. Same thing in Azure, same thing in VMware, and so on. So we built native services. And then if you think about, we said it's just not about the native services. It is about how do you, at the end of the day, what the business cares is the application. So that's why we start with the application and go down. That's something we do. And the question is, even though we build the best of class service for each one of the clouds, one of the challenge for the customers is how do you manage all of them together? So our platform allows the customer to bring all of them together. And that's the benefit of it. So we build a best-in-class solution for each one of them, bring all of them under a single pane of glass for management, and everything is application-centric. And we allow the data to go between these clouds and also be able to manage some easier for the customer. That is something we do. This is an approach we call the inverted platform approach, because in most other vendors, if you look at the way it is actually drawn, they would not draw this way. They would actually draw a big platform at the bottom and then add the sources for them, or what they would actually as individual connections to the source, because they treat the source as one other thing they got to deal with. Whereas in our context, we take each one of those sources, say that's like the pillar, because that's the customer's investment, and we try to provide the best-in-class service for each one of them. I hope I'm making sense and my language is okay. Yeah, it is.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. So the quick things about, if I double click onto saying what's special at a macro level, I'll talk a little bit about some of the capabilities too in the follow-on slides. What's special from a macro level? First thing is that we are a pure SaaS solution. SaaS solution, unlike a lot of the other vendors who actually have a storage background, things like that, we work with a variety of storage and what the storage the customer actually has. But we want to make sure the entire deployment model, delivery model, and the management model for the customer is fully taken care of. That's why we actually deliver it as a pure SaaS offering. And in each one of the marketplaces, Google, Azure, AWS, it is a native service. It's in the market. You can go to the marketplace, turn on the service, and use it as much as you want. If you want, if you don't want, turn it off anytime. That's the true SaaS. That's the way we look at it. The second one, we talk about simplicity, and the challenge is the word simple it's like a buzzword, and everybody uses it and overuses it all the time. So it sometimes becomes a challenge as a customer and as a analyst in this particular case. But the big thing for us is that the simple metric for us is that saying how long does it take, customer have to spend managing it. The way we measure is that, I'll tell you this, the examples I have in my mind are, when we look at our average time customer spend managing the amount of data protection they spend, that's something we look at. Customers who used to spend, who have dedicated people managing it the entire week, right now spend probably a couple of hours a week maximum. That is the demonstration of simplicity, because it's just not about the UI click, it's about what it takes for people to do that. That's what we actually want to really measure. We talk about purpose-built, I was mentioning, and people say, what's so special about purpose-built? Like, it just is one integration. No, it's like, the reason we think of is that every customer, when they go to AWS, when they go to Google, when they go to Azure, when they go to VMware or Nutanix, they'll take each of the solution, or when they go to Isilon, there is a reason they chose that, right? Either it's the scale, it's the power, the analytics, it's the databases. There are specific reasons customers choose to go to a platform, right? One of the things HYCU does is that we try to take advantage of the platform characteristics, which is the snapshots, the replicas, the clones, understand the platform itself, understand the cloud. That's why I tell people, what we build is a cloud intelligence solution. Because we understand the platform, we automatically know what's the right thing to do in the platform, so that to keep the cost, the customer's cost and the expense minimal. That is one of the things which we do. It is something unique then compared to we're building a generic solution. That's what we do. The thing about application-centric, the key thing here is that everything we do is starting with the application context. We have a patent as a company. What this allows us to do is that as soon as our system service gets turned on, we actually can automatically determine what applications are running in your infrastructure, be it in your VMs or be it in your containers. Or in your cluster, Kubernetes clusters, we determine what applications are running there. Once it's done, then we can automatically simplify the entire backup, the migration, or the DR, because we can make it right from the get-go to make sure it's application consistent, because we understand the application. We know what to do. We don't even have to ask the customer what is required. Make sure it's application consistent, backup application consistent, migration application consistent, DR. People say, so what's special about it? The main reason, as you guys know, from a recovery perspective, that's where this application consistency becomes a lot more critical. And that is something we do. A couple of other things. 100% of a solution is agentless. People say, really, but is it really agentless? I said, answer is yes, it is agentless. That is what we do. Be it in public cloud or on-prem, including backing up physical servers, there is no agents. We don't use agents for that. The last thing is we are storage agnostic. The key thing, one of the fundamental philosophies at HYCU is that we want to make sure we want to give the customer the choice. We don't want to force you to actually go after a particular storage platform. We want to use what's best for you. And the other reason we also think of it, that there are some people who take the public cloud, add a backup service on top of it, and sell the storage. The way we think of it is, why are you paying tax on top of public cloud storage? Because the whole idea of a public cloud storage, it's supposed to be cost effective, right? We don't want to add a tax on top of that. That's one of the reasons we want to give the customer the choice to choose the best storage for your requirement at the lowest cost. That is something to do. Is there a question? Okay. Of all the stuff, the one thing which I'm very proud of for us as a company is our net promoter score. As you guys know, many of you probably know about net promoter score. This is an extremely hard number to get, but we're very proud of our net promoter score of 91. People say, have you always been, when we originally started, we were at lower than 91, but we actually had to work hard to get it to 91, and maintaining that is even harder. And we have a great team, and that's one thing. It's our solution, it's our sales, it's our support, it's our customer success. And that's something I think it's the entire interaction with our customers, and we are very happy for what the customers have told about us. So that's about us, about as a company.
Sorry, Subbiah, there's a question coming in.
Sure.
Could you repeat, please, what you understand by purpose built? What is the purpose? Is that a workload or something?
Got it. So I think the question was, I just want to make sure I get the question is, what does it really mean by purpose built, and is it a workload or something, is what you said. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So when we think of purpose built, for example, I'll pick one of the clouds, so Google. Let's take Google, right? A lot of the traditional way people have actually done is that if I'm a classic software vendor, I would develop for one of the platforms. Let's take, I built it for VMware. I'll take the VMware solution and port it over to the public cloud, make some few changes and make it work. That's how people have traditionally done. The challenge we felt was when you start doing that, right, you're not truly taking advantage of the platform. In this case, the public cloud, in this case, the Google, right? So what we end up doing is that when we went to Google, we completely built and natively built on Google for Google in a truly elastic scale in a classic Google Cloud Services model. That's something which we talk about as purpose-built because it uses the Google language, it uses the Google terminology, it uses the Google snapshots, the Google clones, the Google replica. It understands the Google regions. It understands the cost effect of keeping the data, this one. It understands the compute. At every level, it understands, because every cloud vendor, as you know, has a different nuance of doing that. That is one thing we have built for every one of the clouds, natively on the cloud. So it's an expensive affair as an engineering organization, but from a customer perspective, it becomes so intuitive for them, the way it looks and behaves and things like that. That's what we end up mean by purpose.
Do you provide any level of observability and transparency for the customer?
I heard this transparency. What is the first part you said? Sorry.
Observability and transparency.
Yes, that's a great question. The observability and transparency comes in two different fashions, like what you're saying. It's a great question there. The first one is that observability of our service. The second one is of our own service. The second one is how do we make sure from a security perspective for the customer too, for the transparency aspect you said, whatever we use, do we tell the customers how can they monitor? The good thing about HYCU, I'll tell you, is that the only way we never own the customer's credential. Like the only way we operate is that we get the customer's token. When we log in, the customer logs in with their native cloud credential. And when they do that, we get a token, and that's all we do. The good thing is that token can be used only with the native APIs, be it Google, Azure, AWS, or wherever it is. And the good thing is that everything we do is logged in their own native logs and native consoles. So the good thing for the customer is they ever have to find out what did HYCU do, everything is logged, right? That's number one. And so we don't have any other privileges except what they provided us. And everything we do is fully monitored. And we also are we use also the native, in all the different clouds, use the native cloud observability tools, the management monitoring tools and things like that. As well as we provide customers in every one of our solutions, we provide them webhooks, for example, for automatic notification. And everything in HYCU is done as an API because the entire UI is built out on our own APIs. So even for customers who want to add, for example, some of the customers use Splunk and things like that to actually use to track us, absolutely can do that.
Yeah. So you don't provide observability tool yourself?
That's a great point. Yes. So for observability from a data protection perspective, we give you the status, the monitoring, the reporting, all that stuff is built in. The question is that, do we provide observability as an independent across the infrastructure? That is not what we are. Focus is completely data protection, and that's what we do.
Okay, so if there is any threat intelligence or threats occurrence, you would send an alert to the user.
That is right. You're spot on. You are spot on. So the way we end up doing is that, so from a threat perspective, actually in the follow-on slides, I'll also talk about, from a threat perspective, we do track we do actually anomaly detection, for example, what you talked about, ransomware threats. As soon as things like that, we do actually notify the customers. The things for us are, we'll obviously log it. We will automatically send a notification to customer, like using a webhook, or if they want an email alert, or like an automatic integration with one of their current consoles like ServiceNow, things like that. Absolutely, yes. Those are things which we provide. But we expect the other tools.
Do you support telemetry, like open telemetry?
So today, when telemetry becomes a little more open term, I'll just tell you what are the things which we end up. Everything in a telemetry, in the sense that we do actually, for the customer, we do our internal telemetry. We do actually have telemetry which we actually collect from the customer. I think that's one thing we do. The second thing is that everything we collect is from the native APIs. So the customer, everything what we do is available for the customer, so they can absolutely use it from a telemetry perspective. Answer is yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, thank you. So that's a quick rundown about what's special about what are some things unique to us. These are high-level points. There are obviously a lot more details. Quick thing from a customer industry recognition, we are, as we said, we have a little over 3,600 customers. The quick thing, the way I'll mention to people is that we are, I said 75 plus, it's actually 78 plus countries. And we have over 400 partners and over 3,600 customers. Here's just a sample of customers. It's spread all around the world. I mean, like, the thing about us, people say, oh, so most of the younger companies, as you know, headquartered in the United States, typically have companies in that. The key thing for us is that we are spread worldwide across the board. Customers, the amazing thing is that for our size of the company, typically people are focused on certain areas. For us, we would probably say we are like almost like 50-50 between the United States and outside the United States. So that's the way it is. So we are truly a global company. The things which I think a lot of our customers like, I guess you guys are in Germany, so you probably would hopefully appreciate this thing a lot more. Data sovereignty is a critical thing for us. We try to make sure the data is in the place, as always, in the control of the customer. We do not own the customer's data at any point in time. That is something we do. Yep. That's a quick thing about us. Across the board, obviously, from a customer partner, there's lots of recognitions there. We have great customers, and I think we can actually give you a lot more information on this topic. The thing I'm going to do is that since I'm going to do a quick recap of us as a company over the last few months. So I would love to hear if you guys have any questions, always stop me. I tend to talk fast, so if I'm not clear. We had one of the most recent thing for us is the Series B. The interesting thing about us as a company is that we were a privately held company for a long time, for the first few years, because the reason is that we wanted to come to a certain maturity. We wanted to be almost self-funded, and that's the model we ended up doing. The amazing thing is that at some point in 2020, Bain Capital Ventures and Acru came on, and they looked at our business and they said, guys, we want to invest because we see a tremendous potential. You can actually grow faster. That's what they invested in March of 2020. That was a Series A. And the most recent Series B was in June of this year. And the first Series A was 87.5 million. That was our first. That is one of the largest rounds in Bain's, this one, first Series A. In Series B, we have had 53 million. And the total is a little over 140 million we as a company. So from a customer's confidence perspective, this has actually helped increase the confidence in customers in us. And this also is because the same investors came in again. It's a great confidence they have placed in us. Our existing investors are Acru and Bain Capital Ventures. This is they call BCV. I'm sure you guys know the name there. So, but those are big names, and very, very, very happy and very thankful that they've been invested in us. One of the recent changes for us is from a board membership perspective. In addition to Simon Taylor, our CEO, and Enrique Salem, who many of you might remember from Symantec. How many of you remember Symantec days? And Enrique Salem, he was the CEO for Symantec. And he was the person who actually bought Veritas at that time, in the original Veritas acquisition, things like that. So he's been part of that. We are very fortunate to have him. In addition, in the most recent round, Teresa Gao joined us. She is one of the early investors in Facebook, as many of you probably remember, and she's been a fantastic addition to our board. That's a quick thing about Teresa. The interesting thing for us is, in addition to our existing investors, the thing we are very fortunate is that we got some great strategic investors. Atlassian, many of you remember the Jira and Confluence. I'm assuming you guys are familiar with Jira, Confluence, Trello, and so on. So they invested in us because they looked at what we do and how it can scale to some of the SaaS services customers actually are using. And that is something they were very happy with. And that's something they looked at as a great opportunity for them to invest, and they have invested in us. And the second one,
yes,
go ahead.
You claim to be able to protect a multi-cloud environment. How do these clouds interoperate with your platform? I mean, are there interoperability standards, or is it just via the APIs?
So I can repeat if did you hear
the
question?
Yeah, could you please just 1 second? Sorry, the voice is not good.
So how does our product interoperate with these clouds? Are we using any interoperability standards between those clouds as we deliver multi-cloud capabilities?
Got it. Great question there. So one of the things. Okay, so I'll just mention some. So the thing is with regards to interruption, see, today what happens is that a lot of customers do ask us about multi-cloud, data transfers and data migration between clouds. Today, I would say 98% of the customers are, when they talk about multi-cloud, it's actually between on-prem and public cloud, on-prem and one of the public clouds and back is the majority, right? I would say 95%.
Can you speak a bit slower? I don't understand you.
Thank you. I will do that. Really.
I don't know if this microphone is working. That's why.
That microphone picks up our voices,
okay,
but
great.
our voices for the remote speakers are being picked up by that laptop.
Oh, you should have told us.
Well, it's simply because the second presenter who was supposed to be here at the last minute couldn't come because they were sick. So we rigged this up to ensure we could still have a second technical presenter for you guys, and this is what we could come up with. So that laptop is picking up our voices for the guys at the other end of Zoom, but the AV people to prepare the video are picking up our voices from the mics.
So I shout at this laptop.
Yes, I'm not sure whether you shout, but that's what.
Hey, laptop! Can you hear me?
It is picking up quite well. So
it's picking up quite well. We did a test with Vanessa earlier, so it should be okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I was able to hear. I wanted to make sure I get it right, and thanks for. Thank you. I'll try to consciously talk slower. I know I'm generally. So the thing is multi-cloud thing. So one of the things we see is that about 95% of the customers are typically today, still when they talk about multi-cloud, they are between on-prem and one of the public clouds and back. That's the majority. When people talk about, we do get requests from customers saying, hey, I want to do the data transfer between clouds is something which they end up talking. I will talk about one of the use cases which we actually offer for clouds in the multi-cloud in a short while. In a few slides, I'll talk about it. But the bigger thing for customers right now, one of the big concerns for customers is the egress cost. I'm sure you're very familiar with it, right? Because
what is that again? Egress. Yes.
Egress.
Yeah.
Ah,
The egress cost is the big egress cost is a big problem for a lot of customers. And because as you know, typically an egress cost is about 6 months, approximately 6 months worth of storage time is almost the equivalent of keeping the data for 6 months. So that's why it becomes the egress costs are prohibitively high for a lot of customers. And that's one of the reasons they're not doing it today, right? That said, where we have helped customers is when they have data, they want to do data movement between clouds. Typically, it's because they are migrating some of the workloads from one to the other. Today, we offer them a very simple, what we call a two-step migration for customers if they want to go between clouds. That's what we end up offering. There are alternative methods I will talk about in a couple of slides, which we just recently introduced a method for customers as how to move data between clouds or have the option to go to any cloud of your choice. I'll talk about in a very short while. In a couple of slides, I'll talk about it.
okay. Will you also talk about, hello laptop, will you also talk about storage classes?
Yes, that's a great question. So with regards to storage class, as I mentioned earlier, our goal is to make sure, give the customers the choice of using the lowest cost storage possible for their class of requirement, right? The thing about HYCU is that we let you choose the standard tier, the nearline tier, the cold line, the archive, or the deep archive. Choose whatever class of storage you want. Either you could choose it, or the system itself, HYCU itself, if you let us choose, we will choose the cheapest storage possible in your infrastructure. This is where the HYCU's cloud intelligence come into picture. Because let's say, for example, if a customer says, I want to keep the data for 1 year, we automatically choose what we call the nearline storage. We say, for 1 year, you're better off there, Mr. Customer, keep it there, and you'll be better off. So that's something we do. Those are examples we automatically do for customers.
Okay,
Yep.
great. So the customer, if I understand you correctly, would have to do something.
The two things, the customer has to have the account in that particular cloud. As soon as they have it, HYCU can either auto provision the storage for them, right? Or they can explicitly use the storage. So we give you both options. Either you could provide us or let us automatically create and manage it for you. We can do both.
Okay, I'm sure the customer would opt for the automatic handling.
That's the majority. I'll tell you where sometimes customers actually override, right? For example, if there are compliance reasons, then they say, you know what, no. I know it's cheaper, but don't keep it there because I got to do for XYZ reasons. I got to do something different. That is
like
yes.
GDPR.
That's right. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Does the customer have to write the rules, or would you provide a sort of template for him?
The HYCU automatically calculates. That's what we call the cloud intelligence. We automatically understand the lowest cost for your class of requirement, and we automatically choose it. That is something HYCU automatically does.
How's the classification of the categorization of the data done and handled? Do you have something like, not template, but do you have functionality that's out there the customer can actually choose, so that the automatic tiering is done via some sort of categorization of data?
That's a great question. So when it comes to categorization of data, typically the way we recommend customers do it from an automation perspective, there are two ways they can end up doing. The first is, one of the things about HYCU is we talk about our policies, because that's your definition of what's your business commitment, right? And when you create the business commitment itself, you can say, these commitments are for these category of data. You can automatically pre-select it. And once you do that, whenever a new data with that category comes up, we automatically apply that policy and we automatically follow those rules. So to your point about what we call template, we call our policies, and that define how the customer has to do it. And we automatically apply that for the customer.
Do please?
Yep, thank you. So, quick thing, the second thing around is Cisco was the other strategic investor. As many of you probably know, Cisco has a division called, they have all the UCS servers, the HX servers, and so on. But the bigger thing for them is that they are investing a significant amount of investment in what they call the Intersite platform. And this is their software as a service platform. And one of the things when they were very happy to see what we are doing, and they decided to become a strategic investor for us. We are very happy to have them as a partner here. That is something they were, again, from an investment perspective, they've done it. Some of the couple of other highlights I want to just, so we as a company, for many of you, we are probably new, so it's probably not that apparent. One of the things when we went back and looked at us as a company, what's our broader mission as a company, as every one of our team members, the way we think of it is that our goal is to build a safer world, and that's when we synthesized it. That's what came out from our team, to build a safer world. The thing which is probably more important for the immediate term for people is that from a solution perspective, our goal is to be able to protect wherever the data is, protect it wherever it is. That's something there, because a lot of other people would say, you got to move everything into my data, my backup infrastructure, and I'll protect it. While that sounds nice, today, the data is in hundreds of different places. If you migrate everything into one, it sounds nice, but you will never bring everything. You got to protect the data where it is. For example, most customers start with one cloud and definitely end up with 2 clouds or more. That's very normal, right? And not only that, there are SaaS services, and customers don't have one SaaS service. On an average, the average company has 150 different SaaS services. How could you expect the customer to bring everything into one place? The way we tell people is that you got to manage in one place, but the data has to be closer to where the intelligence is. That's what we end up telling customers. So our goal is to eliminate the silo, but that from a management perspective, that's what we think of.
So you provide a sort of a single pane of glass.
That is right. That is right. We can actually help you manage across all these clouds, which we talk about, from a single pane of glass. Absolutely right. And in addition, well, I will also tell you is that everything we do is done via API. So it doesn't have to be our pane of glass. We provide you a single management infrastructure, which you can take and integrate into any of your other management classes, if that's what you want to do. Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the reasons some of the service providers like us, because we are so easy to integrate into their infrastructure.
So you provide backup plus restore. And how do we handle restore? Is that based on RPO and RTO?
That's a great question.
Is it 0?
Yes. Okay. So from a recovery perspective, at the end, as you clearly point out, backup is great. At the end of the day, what customers care about is recovery, and that's their most important thing. From a technology perspective, I'll tell you, as far as in the world of data protection, as you know, there are 3 key things for customers, right? How long you want to keep the data, how much time, how long do you want to keep the data, how often you want to back it up, and the last thing, which is the most important thing, which is how much time do you have to recover? When something bad happens, how long is it going to take for you, right? As you call the recovery time objective. That's the critical thing for customers. In pretty much every software you talk about, the way they will ask you the first 2 questions, how long you want to keep the data and how often you want to back up. That's something everybody asks. The third question around how much time do you have to recover is not a question you hear all the time. The reason is in most systems, it's very hard to really do that. In HYCU, we took a slightly different approach. Every time we ask a customer, please tell us how much time you have to recover. And what we do is because I told you about the intelligence, we automatically choose the right storage targets, which can support that level of recovery. And we also make sure that it is not at the time of backup, continuously we monitor to see, are you compliant? In case something bad happens today, will you be able to recover within the given time you have? That is something we do.
Okay,
Right.
because that's essential.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
no business can afford to wait 1 or 2 days for
Yes,
the recovery of its data. If you're under attack or in an emergency, catastrophe of any kind, you want to be back in business in a jiffy.
absolutely. So to the point you said, there are two kinds. Again, from a recovery, I break it down to two parts. One is the operational recovery, which typically people think of, right? As you guys clearly know, when I say operational recovery, oh my God, our database got corrupted, I dropped a table, I deleted a file. Those are the classic operational recovery. That is something most people plan. The thing we also tell customers and recommend them is, as you clearly said right now, which is what happens in the case of a disaster and how fast can you recover and where can you recover, right? That is something, that's one of the reasons we tell customers have an ability to do a disaster recovery to a different cloud, because that's purely gives you the assurance, and that's something we end up doing. And we can do it at scale for customers. That's one of our beauty of our solution. I can actually, I'll tell you more about it now. Just
When you say scale, what does that really mean? Are we talking about petabytes?
yes, actually, the good thing about data protection, I'll tell you, is that it's you guys are engineering folks too. You guys know about engineering. The thing is, it's a problem which can be broken down into smaller chunks and you can parallelize it. Right? That's the good thing. The good thing is the way we end up doing at HYCU is that, let's say, for example, the good thing in the way we do in public cloud is that by default, there's no resources running on the cloud except you're using your cloud storage. That's all we're keeping the data. At the time of a disaster, you say, oh my God, something bad happened. I want to bring these 1,000 machines up. We don't have to wait for one guy at a time. The way we end up doing is that we create enough. Good thing in cloud is elastic. We create enough of our, what we call workers, HYCU workers, to do things in parallel and recover the data in parallel. That way, it's not a sequential operation. We can distribute the workload we can decide to do 10, 100 machines spinning up at any parallel point in time. That is something we could do. And that's why I said, in some sense, we are lucky in data protection. We can parallelize the work into a lot more easier chunks. That's how we do it.
So you work with clusters.
Absolutely. Yes. The other thing is, from an investor perspective, one of the other good things is Okta. I'm assuming all of you guys are familiar with Okta, right? Okta. Yeah. So Okta is one of our strategic investors, and we are very happy with them. The amount of integrations they have done with the different data sources is amazing, and that is something we look forward to leveraging. That's with regards to our investors and our overall company. I'm going to double click in some of the things we have done from a solution perspective and give you guys an update there. One of the things is that we have introduced a free tier for what we call our solution for AWS. What we have introduced is what we call a free and fully managed backup service for AWS. As all of us know, AWS is the largest cloud provider today. One of the things is that you would normally expect for the amount of customers, people would think they had to back up the data. The amazing thing is we found that many of the customers, even today, do not realize public clouds do not provide you backup by default. It's your responsibility, right? It sounds strange, but that is something we have to constantly sometimes reiterate to customers. That's the first thing. The second part is that some people, because majority of the clouds were originally started by a DevOps team or engineers who are looking at not necessarily operations folks, the way they think of is that, oh, I will just write a script and it's good enough. What we have heard from customers is that as long as things are going fine, nobody thinks of backup, right? It's like insurance, and you never think of insurance when things are good. That's what happened. So when things go bad, that's when they realize the level of lack of automation they actually have. That's one thing we wanted to solve. We wanted to make sure customers have a minimum level of protection at no cost. So we are delivering a free, fully managed backup service for customers, right? we utilize the native EBS snapshots the customers have. There is no limitation on capacity. Customers can use with as much capacity, as much instances they want to actually protect. That is something we do. It's 100% fully managed service in this case. The thing about is, as I mentioned earlier, it is 100% agentless. The biggest thing for the customers is around the recovery. You could do individual file, folder, all the recovery, everything in an intuitive UI. Because the challenge is that the alternative is the customers have to write a script, an XML file, things like that to recover. In this case, we've said, let's actually make it extremely simple, UI-driven thing, because especially in the time of recovery, you are under stress and you want a simple method to recover. And that's something we do. Right. And the larger thing which we do for customers is that what I call the set and forget. Why do I say that? In a public cloud, as all of you know, it is great to say that, oh, I have backup. The challenge is that if you use your traditional backup where you have to set up a backup for every time a new instance comes up, that worked really well in a data center. But in a reason customers are going to public cloud is because it's easy to create a virtual machine, easy to spin up a new machine, new infrastructure, and delete it whenever you don't want, right? Your backup software has to be also adaptive and agile. And there's nobody sitting and monitoring, saying a new machine coming up and let me go back up, right? That problem is there. So that's one of the reasons we tell people saying we want to do a set and forget. There was a question earlier around how do we categorize? Is there a template? This is where our automation, our intelligence actually comes into picture, because we can automatically find the right infrastructure and protect them at the right level. And that's the set and forget model, which we actually provide in the infrastructure. Yeah, I hope I'm making sense. If you have any questions, let me know. The other thing which when we did the free service, we talked to customers, and a big problem for a lot of them is that in the world of AWS, people have different accounts. When we talk about accounts, is that they say, let's say a large organization, right? They have a finance department, engineering department, support, and so on, right? Everybody has their own infrastructure within AWS. And the way they control it is that they give everybody an account. That way, say, oh, all of you guys have individual accounts, and that's how you manage it. But the IT team, which is responsible broadly, wants to see what's going on across the board, right? Today, it is such a challenge for customers to get a full visibility across the board. With HYCU, even with our free tier, customer gets to see what's available across all the accounts and how much are they protected. That is given to customers at no charge. That is something there. And the good thing is that it's just not about that. We automatically constantly inform them. They don't even have to come to the system. We proactively monitor for them, and we report to them and give them notifications.
Hello, laptop. Are you going to update the AWS dashboard every time something new gets released by AWS?
That's a great question. Are we going to update the AWS dashboard every time new comes up? That's a big challenge, actually, working with public cloud providers where they add a lot of new services. Your answer is absolutely right. So the way we end up doing is that, see, this is where our solution actually comes into picture. The way we end up doing is that because we are a solution which actually can scale, built very modularly and can scale, that's one of the reasons we are able to do it. Yes, that's something we do. We constantly work with the AWS product managers as well as their infrastructure folks to constantly keep up to date. We do that. The other intelligent thing I'll tell you where our infrastructure is slightly different than many other people. For example, this is a real use case. One of our customers, we were working with them, and one of our existing customers had in 6 different regions they were protecting data. They were going to, in this particular case, it was, I think, Google. Google was opening up a new region in Mumbai, India. And they said, oh, when can you guys support it? I don't know how long it's going to take. I said, the day they announce it, the day they make it available, we support it. They said, how is that? Because this is where building the cloud intelligence and building tightly integrated. Every time a new service comes up, our system automatically gets notified And whenever a customer wants it, we can, because we use all their native APIs and we are integrated into their platform, we can automatically detect new services and especially new regions and things like that coming up. Not a problem, and that's how we support it. So it's the native level integration into the platform helps us here.
Yeah, okay, great.
Thank you. The thing around you guys in Germany hopefully probably appreciate a lot more around data sovereignty. We keep the data in the customer's projects, always in the customer's account. HYCU never owns the customer's data. This is a big difference for customers, especially from a data safety and security perspective. And that's always in the customer's access. That's a quick summary of what we do. Again, it's just completely, there's no limitation on the capacity. This is something the way we did this service was we introduced this thing in a very small test environment in a place called in Anaheim, California, for a small set of AWS customers, tested it, learned it, and at reInvent just recently last week, we actually broadened it out to a broad set of customers. The good thing is that for customers who have actually initially used it, they've been very happy at the speed at which they can get adopt the service and no charge, how the ability for it to scale.
Is there a steep learning curve, or is it just also for people who are not so skilled in data engineering?
It's a great question you mentioned. See, I'll probably tell you one of the challenges customers have in cloud adoption, as you guys well know, is the complexity. The learning curve for people, right? As you clearly point out, that's a big challenge. The thing about HYCU is that we want to truly make it simple. If it takes the entire thing from start to finish of starting to consume the service, if it takes more than 10 minutes, something is wrong to start to with a particular one. That's the level of simplicity we actually deliver here. And everything is done in the UI, and it's completely, as long as you have the access, the biggest thing is the access, the permissions. As long as you have the permissions, everything less than 10 minutes, you should have it fully up and running service. I'll give you a true incidence. One of our customers who went to the marketplace, turned on the service, and was using it for 2+ months. And then I, as a product guy, always love to talk to customers. I said, can you get on a call and talk? He got on a call. For 20 minutes, he asked me all sorts of questions. At the end of 20 minutes, he asked me, Subbiah, I got to tell you something. I said, oh, something bad is coming. He said, 2 minutes after turning on the service, I don't know what else to do, because it is truly, which I was once unhappy, because that's exactly right, because system is supposed to be so simple and clean that you turn it on and you should not have to worry about it anymore. So I'm very happy to say, yes, it is a simple solution for customers. The learning curve is very small. The reason learning curve is also very small is because we are purpose built, in the sense that we understand the cloud. You don't have to tell us about it. We understand the applications. You don't have to tell us about it. And the third thing is that the terminology we use, a lot of the things are very aligned to the cloud you are using. So that's why there's nothing new to learn for that particular one. Those are the reasons we make it simple for customers.
Okay. So you just have to know about the cloud and how you do backups and recoveries. That's it.
And even that, we make it, one of the things I always tell my engineering team is that it has to be in simple English. That's what, when I'm talking English. So you got to be in simple English. Don't make it complicated buzzwords thing there. For example, to the point we talk about, especially when some of the users who are not daily backup users, simple terminology, which the people in the backup world think, RTO, RPO, retention, all it sounds very natural to us for people who have been in the data protection space. But for a regular user, an engineering user coming there, for them, this is not they don't think of. How do you present it in a simple language which they get it quickly without having to learn a new book? That's our entire objective here. Yeah. Cool. So that's one of them. And the other set of capabilities which I'll talk about is in the most recent release, some of the updates to our platform. It's two areas of focus. One is around data mobility. The other one is data security. I'll just quickly go through it. The first one is around Azure. This is, in your sense, you guys probably wonder, why am I talking to a German audience about Azure? I'll give you a little more context to this one. This applies to a broad set of people than the classic, what people think of Gov. The first one is that I'll start with, this is specific to United States, but this applies broadly for the native government cloud services for each of the country. I'll just probably talk about it. Today, in Azure, Microsoft Azure, we have a commercial, for the commercial cloud, we have a native backup service in the commercial cloud. The challenge for customers is that the government clouds behave very differently than the commercial cloud, right? And because they're very differently, you cannot turn on or go to the marketplace and turn on just like that because its behaviors are different. Number two, in the government clouds, at least in the United States, there is what they call the FedRAMP requirements, which are very specific, and they take 18 to 24 months. And that slows down the innovation adoption for customers. That's one of the reasons what we at HYCU did was our engineers came up with a way where our infrastructure, our service can be run, instead of deploying it in our projects, our resources, it can be deployed inside the customer's resource. Again, it is the same simple service, but run inside the customer. So from a data security, there's all that stuff, all your data, even the service is running within your infrastructure. Data is always with you, but even the service is starting to run inside yours. This is a lot more effort, but that is something we have made it happen. And this also eliminates the need for what we call the FedRAMP certification for customers, because the data is already secure. This service is, when we talk about Azure Gov, every public cloud vendor, Google, Azure, AWS, everybody is trying to provide a country-specific or region-specific clouds these days. And as they are expanding it, we will make it available in all those different infrastructure. What does this really mean? I mean, for the customer, number one, it's the backup or the data assurance, as we call it. We try to make sure it is actually, it's again built for the cloud. It is completely intelligent, agentless, like what I mentioned earlier, same things. It is fully self-service enabled. So even in a larger organization, the backup team alone does not have to manage it. You can get your database administrators to come and recover the data, back up the data, any of that themselves. That's something you could do. And also we make it completely multi-tenant. Our system is built to be multi-tenant ready. This is one of the reasons service providers like us, because it becomes a native service of the platform, right? That's something there. The other part is just not the backup aspect of it. Customers can go from their on-prem infrastructure to a government cloud infrastructure and come back. That is the entire, we make this entire process one click. We truly mean by one click process. People say, how could you make it that way? The beauty of our service is all these are independent services which talk to each other through the APIs, and they are dynamically instantiated and they can dynamically disappear. That's truly the value of the way the service is built. It's truly a multi-cloud architecture with the multi-services, completely service-based. Yeah, that's something we do. So again, the backup, the migration, and the disaster recovery from on-prem to public cloud and public cloud to back. And some of the things here, which is we talked about here, so I'm not going to bore you with that thing. Again, it's integration into the cloud services. It's a native solution, so it's from a customer perspective. You can consume in the marketplace right there. It's agentless. And the other big thing is you guys did talk about ransomware, or the concern is that the data, we can support all the worm targets and make sure the completely data is air-gapped for customers. In addition, I can tell you in the public cloud, we can also make sure that the backup data is kept in completely isolated in a different project than your production infrastructure. Because in public cloud, as you know, a bad actor can come and delete the projects just like that. That's the choice for them. The good thing is that we can make sure the data is isolated and with a different credential, none of the production people can actually delete it. That is something we actually can provide for them.
Will you use object lock technology coming from AWS suite?
Yes, that is something we absolutely support, the object lock. Yep, that is something.
Because object lock has two options. So Option 1 is no delete. Option 2 is delete only with certain preconditions
Yes,
to governance.
absolutely. So we support both of them. Totally. Yeah. So when we talk about recoverable restore for customers, this is just one example. We just want to, I'm not sure the screen is very there. The key thing is that whether recovering the data in an on-prem or in a public cloud, the recovery is extremely simple in the case of HYCU. And these are just screenshots I just wanted to show to demonstrate the simplicity. When you think of a recovery, you just have to select the virtual machine, which you actually need. And when you want to recover it, automatically we understand the different cloud and the different, this is where I was saying, we understand the different regions and what you actually have access to, right? And show you the exact one. We understand the cloud terminology and it is totally native there. And when you recover the data, we automatically also allow you to reconfigure the machines. You could have had a large machine, but now you want to just test it. So you might want to spin up in the public cloud. The good thing in public cloud, you can change the size of the machine, right? From small to large, large to small. Change the memory, change the configuration. We automatically can do that for you at the time of recovery. No extra effort required. Everything runs with the UI. This is not just that, it's also ability to spin up. You talked about multi-cloud. There was a question earlier on saying, what happens can we do cross-cloud? One of the things about our solution is that right from one of the government clouds, you can spin up on AWS, you can spin up on Google, any of that infrastructure cross-cloud, we can actually do that for you, right? So it allows you to spin up from one cloud to the other automatically. That is something we can actually do that too. Yep. So that's the first part. The second one of the things we constantly ask ourselves is that how could we keep the cost low for our customers? One of the areas where we think of is around when it comes to multi-cloud, especially because of ransomware, right? Today, when you think of disaster recovery, the immediate thing most people think of is, oh my God, it's expensive. Disaster recovery is expensive and complex. The reason is that they all come from traditional disaster recovery tools and solutions. The thing we tell people is that's true. It was, and it's an expensive affair if you think of the traditional methods. But what happens and that's one of the reasons most customers, when they think of disaster recovery, they say, I can't do for all of my infrastructure. Let me choose the small number of critical services that alone I will bring up. The rest of them I'll give up. That's the way they end up doing. That was great because when your disaster was typically a couple of days, day or two. But in the case of ransomware, on an average, it takes anywhere between 16 to 22 days for a customer to come back fully online in case of a disaster, in case of a ransomware attack. And that's the average, right? So some customers even take longer, as you know. That's why we look at saying, how could we help customers? What we tell them is that, guys, you got to have a cost-effective disaster recovery for your entire infrastructure, right? That's the thing which we tell people. And then the question is that, number one. Number two, we don't want customers to have to spend the money. The reason people used to think disaster recovery is very expensive is because traditionally in disaster recovery, they had to have this entire system equal and system idle in a different location. The good thing is that with the public clouds and with some of the newer storage services, it can be simpler for customers. I'm assuming you're familiar with the Wasabi. Wasabi is a great partner of ours. Similar to Wasabi, we have other MSPs. So the way we tell people is that what we will do for customers is that keep a copy of your data on Wasabi or one of the managed cloud service providers. By default, you just keep one copy in that, right? HYCU will keep it up to date all the time. Only at the time of a disaster, with a single click, you should be able to spin up your infrastructure on any of the public cloud, be it Google, Azure, or AWS, you can choose on any one of them. So if you think about it, you're paying for storage, only for storage at any point in time. Only in the case of a disaster or a disaster test are you spinning up any of the compute resources, because they are the most expensive part. Storage is cheap, right? This, people say, so what's special about this? Traditionally, if you did not use something like a Wasabi or a MSP managed storage, in the public cloud, if you want to change the cloud or move data, there is an egress cost. And now you don't have an egress cost because Wasabi does not charge an egress cost. That's why for the customer, it gives you the choice, it gives you the lowest cost for storage, and it gives you the flexibility of going to any public cloud of your choice. That is something we do. And that's the benefit of this, beauty of this solution, right? And in addition, one of the things we in HYCU do is that we go all in. I mean, one is the flexibility this provides. The second one is the cost, right? We try to make sure the data we store, even on the cheapest storage, is what we call single instance storage, because our other way we call it is called a cloud dedupe. It's not the classic deduplication, it's what we call cloud dedupe. It is a smart way of saying only the unique blocks are stored locally in the system. We never use compute or memory, because in a classic deduplication infrastructure, that becomes expensive. We don't do that. We keep the data in a single instance, and still at the time of recovery, we can maintain the same speed of recovery as what we would do otherwise. That's the goodness for the customer. So the computers save, storage cost is lower, and they have the flexibility. Am I making sure? Is it clear? Something there? I hope so. So if you have any questions, please do stop me. And again, if I'm going fast, happy to slow down. There was a question around worm storage. You know, the first thing when we think of ransomware, we tell customers saying, first is please validate your backups. One is our backup software, but the other thing is you don't know whether data has been tampered. So you got to constantly validate your backup. We have always provided the backup validation. The thing for customers is that there are two things we say. Typical backup validation, the way they do it is they spin up the machine saying, yes, it's working. It's all great. That's one step. But the big thing, what that misses is the application consistency, the database consistency. That's one of the reasons the way we end up doing is that not just what we call the ping test, we also test the application specific logic. That is something we can add as part of the backup validation. So the customer is a lot more assured. That's the first one. The second one is the ransomware detection. This is something we constantly can check to see if something bad is happening. If something bad happens, or if we detect something is wrong in the system, we automatically notify this customer. That's the ransomware detection aspect of it. And this is something we log in our system. We can send a webhook notification to the customer, as well as we can send email notifications. So we have a variety of mechanisms in which and all of our APIs can provide the same infrastructure too. That's the ransomware detection aspect of it. The third one, I would say that.
I have one question. At which point do you detect the ransomware? So if it's already on the backup, or even if it's still in the application?
It's already in the backup. It's already in the backup, or what is the last question you said?
Or if it's still in the application, because ransomware comes in and starts some process, whatever, and if you start detecting it once you have it in the backup already, it might be too late.
Got it. I can actually go through that particular. Yes. So, you know, if you don't do anything, by default, we will detect in the backup, right? As the backups are happening, we say, hey, something is wrong, and we notify you. And that's the thing. That's the default thing. The optional thing the customers can turn on is that if, for example, some of the customers, they say before the backup, run this, can you do a check, right? Pre-backup check. That's something we could do. So it's normally we do by default in the backups. We can do a pre-check in the backup. That's second thing. The third thing we can do is at the time of recovery, we can make sure that the data is actually also ransomware free. Am I making sense? So we can do at the backup level, pre-backup, as well as post-recovery. Yep. So that's all 3 levels we can do that. And thank you. And the thing is, with regards to auto detection of targets, I'll tell you, it sounds strange when I say this. Customers spend a lot of money and time creating a lot of this complicated backup infrastructure. But sometimes it's surprising that they forget to set the right permissions on the backup targets. Sounds silly, but it happens. And when we started noticing this, we said, guys, this is crazy. We should never let this happen. And that's why right now in the infrastructure, we constantly check to see who has access to the data, that backup data outside of the backup software. It should never be the case. And that's what we auto detect for the customers. And when there's a problem, we automatically notify them. The last thing in this thing, which I want to call out, is what we call the R score. This is a ransomware readiness assessment. You know, a lot of people say, oh, I'm doing a lot of things for ransomware protection. Sounds great. At the end of the day, for the company, the question is, how ready are you from recovery from ransomware? That's what the company wants to know. You keep adding new technologies, but you got to see, are you getting better? And that's why we came up with a methodology called R score. This looks at your entire infrastructure, your process, and your service, and tells you, saying, are you ransomware recovery ready? That is something there. And it's a score. It's between 0 to 1,000, and it tells you at what level you are. And if you want to bring in a new technology or a new process, it'll tell you, are you going to get better? That's the beauty of the solution. It allows you to actually validate one way or the other. And it's a good way for the customer to measure themselves as saying, should I really invest in a new technology or a new process? That allows the customer to do that.
I have a question.
Sure.
Is it enough to be 90% safe against ransomware when the rest is 10%?
That's a great question. So the way we think of it is that as a data protection vendor, we are the last line of defense, right? The best thing for the customer is to prevent the ransomware or detect the ransomware at the security, the networking layer. That's the best thing. Our thing is around recovery. So the biggest things when we looked at is saying, from a recovery, the challenge is that you think you're backed up. Till you really recover, you don't know for sure you're there, right? That's the challenge for people. And the thing is that how certain can we get the customer to become? And the problem, people think, oh, I have software. No, software is only one part of it, right? The software, the service, the process, the infrastructure we use. There are so many other components which make up the recoverability of the data. That's why we check for the entire assessment, assess the customers, the entire thing, not just the service or not just the backup target, the whole thing. And that's what the recovery score does. So from a ransomware perspective, we support all of the different public cloud targets, which all of the popular ones which the customer actually have. People think, oh, why can't you support every worm target? S3 is very popular. Obviously, we support it. A lot of other vendors say they are S3 compatible. But what you would be surprised is that S3 itself, the reads and the writes in S3, people are compatible. But the worm, they provide the same APIs, but the recovery, the error codes, how they behave in case of something bad happens, their methods are different. That's one of the reasons HYCU constantly validates the system, right? Actually, there's more backup targets we support than this. For example, I missed adding Cloudian in this particular one. We do support Cloudian. So we do support a variety of backup target choices for customers. That's the classic worm targets. In addition, we also support the different things around like the classic data protection solutions customers actually have, like Data Domain or Exagrid or Racktop systems, which also provide ransomware protection with different levels. That's something we do. And last but not the least, customers want tape. Still, some customers use tape. and we have to actually support them. And we do have a partner which actually delivers it for us. That's a quick thing on the ransomware thing. The other area which I'll tell you from a security perspective is that there is never an end to security. We as a company actually deliver a hardened appliance. If it's in the cloud services, we are natively integrated into their identity management. And actually for each of the cloud, for example, on AWS, we go through the entire, what they call the well-architected review, the WAR program, to make sure our service is built with the AWS's architecture in mind, is built with the AWS security, and that is something we have actually done, right? In addition, so that's for the AWS part. It's the same thing in on-prem infrastructure. We are a completely hardened Linux appliance, right? And we can make it a complete black box for customers. Unlike a Windows-based infrastructure, which is easily attackable, ours is a hardened Linux, which we actually deliver for customers. In addition, because of the nature of our service, we are the only software which is listed in the US, what we call the STIG certification. If you go to the STIG certification, look for a solution. HYCU is the only data protection vendor listed there. Those are security compliance measures which we have done. In addition, there is actually, I call it a US government thing, but it's actually 40 different countries worldwide have gotten together and created this common criteria. It's popular in the US. The US government pushes it a lot more, but this is just a certification. And there is extreme rigor we have to go through. It takes about 18 months to go through this process. We have been going through this whole process, and now we are certification ready, in the sense that we have implemented a significant amount of additional security measures in the solution which are built in. This is the reason we even call it out, is that this is not just for the US customer. This applies to every customer in every region, in every vertical. Those are some of the things, measures. These are some of the simple measures which we have included it. And that's why we actually highlight it. So because it's available for every commercial customer too. And this applies in every world in the region. So that's something we do. The last thing in this section which I want to cover is one of the things which we see quite often happening in customers these days is that there is a huge focus to bring everything to the center, to consolidate in the data center. That's what happened for a long time. Off late, we see a lot of data going to the edge. I mean, I'm sure you see a lot of this edge computing and the infrastructure coming up there all the time. The challenge for customers is that in some of the traditional solutions, what happens is, for example, to run a 3-node VMware cluster, they're shipping a 3-node data backup box. We scratch our head and say, oh my God, you double the complexity for the customer, right? In the edge, where they don't have people to manage the infrastructure. That's why, because especially in the edge, number one, they have a large number of sites on the edge. Number two, they don't have enough people managing on the edge. Though the question, and the number three, when they have large number, the question is, how do you keep the costs low? That's where we kept think of how do we actually protect it for customers. This is where one of the things HYCU has added in the capability is that we can make sure only the first copy, we divide the recovery into two parts, operational recovery and disaster recovery. Operational recovery are the traditional thing where somebody deleted, things like that we talked about. Most of the time, within 72 hours, customer recognizes something went bad. So what we do is that we leverage some of the capabilities in the platform and keep the data for 72 hours locally. That doesn't mean we don't keep, and we keep it very efficiently, right? We just keep just the changed blocks very efficiently there locally, right? No extra backup infrastructure required. But we still keep the full copy of the data either in the public cloud or in one of customers' data centers. Good thing for the customer, you dramatically shrink to your infrastructure required on the edge by half, right? Dramatically becomes smaller. Your management is so much more better because there's nothing extra to manage. You save so much time and cost, right? That's the beauty of the solution. So how do you protect your data on the edge without having to spend too much extra money? That's what we are trying to do. Yep. That's the last thing there. I hope I made sense to you. Those are some of the things we do. Again, we as a company do 3 things: backup and recovery, migration, disaster recovery. Our focus is all multi-cloud. And the question is, how simple can we make it for customers? And that's what we are working on, and how cost efficient we want to make it. Let me stop and say, did I make sense? Any questions, comments, thoughts? Happy to answer.
So maybe some of the news with regards to the channel in Germany. We have recently appointed a new distributor in Germany, Ingram Micro. So originally we were working with ADN, which you probably know, right? And now we are kind of, with all the investments we received, we are ready for the next level of growth. And obviously this requires a bit kind of stronger distribution partner for us. And Ingram Micro has kind of filled this gap for us specifically. In particular also because they're also very active in, they have their own marketplace, public cloud. So, all these things are very important to us for this next wave of growth we plan to deliver in next year, right? We want to invest in, so that's maybe one bit of the news. Of course, existing resellers that we work with are already some of the very known names you probably know. Companies like Bechtle work with us, Cancom, SVA, and similar, right? So these are already existing resellers, but of course with Ingram Micro's help, we plan to expand this even further. So just a little bit of kind of channel update, also from my perspective in that regard. And we wanted also Ingram Micro to be here, but it was a bit of a too late notice for them. However, they are very happy to speak with any of you if you wanted to, right? Have a kind of short conversation on, the significance of HYCU from their perspective. We are very happy to set this up. Actually, I think their CEO is home in Munich, but he was just too busy today, right, to join us. But we can set something up absolutely afterwards.
Yeah. Can I just ask? Obviously, you guys speak to all the leading vendors all the time. Has anything you've heard today from HYCU, does it say anything that is quite different from what you've heard from other backup vendors, for example? Did HYCU say anything that you believe other vendors you are familiar with would say, no, that's not a good idea, or I don't think that's where the market is going, I don't think that's what customers are focused on? Does anything you've heard today make you think, I'm not sure that's quite right? Because obviously you speak to all the vendors, so you are the guys who would know that. And Ulrika, any?
No, I'd say everyone's going the same direction, and multi-cloud is obviously quite the popular term at the moment. And what we find right now is that there are a lot of vendors that have a different definition of multi-cloud.
So that's a good point.
That's so you have to be capable to really look behind the curtains and to really see what their meaning is behind multi-cloud. Okay, but there's definitely a trend. There's not. I guess that Germany is still a bit shy when it comes to using multiple clouds, or in the respect of being more flexible. But that's because the cloud adoption has taken a bit longer in Germany, especially than in other regions, especially when it comes to the US, for instance. Okay, so and I guess that we're just at the verge of seeing multi-cloud really taking place, because we also see at the moment that people are taking workloads off the cloud again. I mean, that's definitely a trend as well, and this is where backup vendors or storage vendors come in as well, because you have to have the flexibility and the capability to do that, to migrate the workloads and data back.
Repatriation, yes.
So there's a bit of both worlds happening at the moment.
So something you said, it's quite interesting. You said, and I don't know, Subbiah, whether you heard that, but one of the points that Ulrika made was different vendors called different things multi-cloud. So again, my question is for you guys, Do you think that some vendors are calling something multi-cloud purely because it's a buzzword, because it's a fashionable thing at the moment? And a bit like when cloud first came, suddenly everyone had a cloud play. And I wanted to say, no, you are simply selling storage to an ISP, to a service provider. That doesn't make you a cloud vendor. That simply means you have cloud customers. Do you think that today there are some vendors which don't actually have a very strong multi-cloud offering, but they want to jump on the bandwagon? Or do you think the cloud is so mature that pretty much every vendor now has a multi-cloud? If they say they do, they have a genuine multi-cloud offering, and therefore the market is getting very, very crowded.
That's a great question there. I mean, I'll tell you from what we see, this is from my perspective, I'll tell you, and I think Bogdan can probably add more too. A lot of times what happens is that, similar to how you mentioned earlier, people will do a cloud washing. Now people are doing a multi-cloud washing. Everything is multi-cloud, and that's something people want to say that, right? That's what happens all the time. It's a classic problem in our industry. When we think of multi-cloud, I think at a minimum, people should, when they talk about multi-cloud, they should be able to support multiple public scale clouds. That's something I think a minimum requirement. That's number one. Number two, we think of it as not just being able to back up to the public cloud, being able to back up the data on the public cloud natively. That is also an important part. I mean, that's what in our version of things that we think of multi-cloud, it has to be truly being able to support different clouds, being able to back up the data on different clouds, and as they able to recover the data across cloud. That is something people should be able to do. Only then does it truly mean multi-cloud. If I take a step back, why should the customer care about even a multi-cloud? It's actually maybe that's something we should think of. The way I think of it is that customers don't want to get locked into one, right? They want the data mobility. That's the reason they are looking to say I want multi-cloud, because otherwise it's for no reason. It's nice to have multi-cloud, but what's the point, right? It's the ability to have data mobility, and that's one of the reasons with the customers. That's the key part, and I think only if you have the data mobility should even be considered a multi-cloud environment.
Okay, when you're talking about data mobility, we're also talking about something that nobody was really addressing, the big elephant in the room, which is data gravity. And that's certainly happening, especially as we are accumulating a nonsensical amount of data. So do you really address that with your customers? Because it's all fair and fine to say, okay, you have the mobility, you can just walk from one cloud to the other. But if I have a huge bulk of data, I'm bound to data gravity, and I really am not that flexible. Even if I have the flexibility to choose this multiple cloud strategy. Do you address that?
That's a great question you mentioned. It's a lot of question. So, one of the things when people, early on I was talking about, I was not very clear. One of the things I was saying was that, people used to think that the only way to simplify that problem was bring all the data back to one location, right? I'm sure you hear people talk about there's data fragmentation and how do you simplify things like that. It sounds nice, but as you clearly said, there's a data gravity. There's data in different parts. Right now it's not in one part. There's no way, even if I tomorrow work very hard to bring everything into one location, new things will pop up all the time. The way I tell people, it's almost like if you have a grass lawn, you will have weeds pop up on a constant basis. You can cut the weeds off, it'll still pop up in your location, because that's the nature, right? Same thing with data, it's just going to come up in your location. The thing which we tell people is that you got to be able to manage it where it is, to the point you exactly said data gravity. There's a reason customers are moving compute closer to the data source where they have. And that's what we believe in. We believe it has to be something which your data protection solution should be adaptable to scale to where your data is, not necessarily to try to say, I got to bring everything to my platform. That was great in the classic data center world. In the multi-cloud world and the multi-SaaS world, there's no way that can be done.
Any more questions?
Yes.
Go for it.
I was wondering, how do you back up streaming data from sensors and other edge devices, like drones?
That's a great question. So the typical thing we end up doing is that from streaming data perspective, if you look at most of the streaming data today, right, where people typically store the streaming data is to keep the costs low. The streaming data typically gets to object storage, especially in the public cloud and the different locations and things like that. That's where customers are keeping the data, streaming data.
What kind of storage? Sorry, what kind of storage do they use?
Could you repeat it?
What kind of storage do they use? Optical? Did you say that?
Yes, that's right. So if you look at most streaming data today is stored in object storage.
Oh, object
right?
storage.
Object storage. And because they are stored in object storage, they are spread out because they want to make sure, to your point, it's created on the edge, the data is created on the edge, and they want to go to the shortest possible distance and keep it locally in the edge, right? Object storage provides that flexibility and it's cost efficient. The question for the customer is that can you protect the object storage because that data which the device created is the tier 1 data.
Yeah.
The good thing in HYCU is that we protect your data which is on object storage itself. So that's the other, we are one of the few software which can actually protect the data even if it's on a classic glacier tier or nearline tier or store code line tier or standards, we can actually protect that. That is one of the things, beauty of our solutions. That's why I said, wherever your data is, we should protect it, and that's something we should be able to do.
So the streaming data from the drone come in and they all get dropped in object storage, but there's no end to it.
So that's true, but if you think about it, it's a streaming, but at any point in time, the question is you can take a copy at a snapshot because you can't. It's a question of data loss, right? I mean, how much are you willing to lose the data in case if it's a backup? There's always a risk reward thing. If you want to back up every bit, we could do it much more often, but the cost becomes prohibitively expensive for our customers. That's one of the reasons we tell them saying how often you want to do it. And I think there are enough smarts in the technology right now to keep your data loss to an extremely minimal thing for a very cost-efficient fashion. That is something we do with our backup software.
Okay, because then if not, as you said, the costs become prohibitive.
That's right.
You couldn't do it.
Absolutely.